Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Hope you're all well. Mikey, Stafford here. We're looking ahead to a weekend with an awful lot of football matches and just a few hurling matches. But we're going to start with the hurling. But our best foot forward, isn't that right, lads? I'm joined by Derek McGrath, Colm Keys, the Irish Independent, as always, Rory O'Neill. How is everybody doing?
How are you?
Good. If we were saying last week there's a couple of do or die matches this weekend, shall we say? I think certainly down in Munster, but we might start with the game in Leinster, Derek, because never get to bloody start with Leinster, and secondly, there's the Master and the Apprentice, etc., here, which has everybody very interested. Let's be honest. I think from as soon as Henry Shefflin was appointed, I think everybody was looking to see when are Galway playing Kilkenny in the championship. So we're down to Pierce Stadium now on Sunday afternoon, and beyond the sideline intrigue, Derek, it is an interesting match because, let's be honest, Kilkenny have won by an aggregate of 39 points thus far, so we haven't really seen them put to the pin of their collar. And Galway were put to the pin of their collar once, but it turns out it was by a Wexford team who may be a bit of a non-entity in the championship this year. It pains me to say. So this is very interesting, and Galway have some injury concerns. So this looks like, a hard road for the old dog Brian Cody to me.
Yeah. Look, you're kind of marrying, I suppose, the easy path that Kilkenny have had so far, picking up the 4 points, getting some game time into TJ, the first game, getting the full game into TJ, the last game, in terms of their preparation ahead of the big match, I suppose, in Salthill or in Pierce Stadium the weekend. And against that, they're kind of saying the kind of, I suppose, the confidence from that Galway would have built up from the big pummeling of Westmeath, I suppose. But look, it's hard to call, it's hard to call. For me, the sextet of forwards that Kilkenny have they're not as good as as Limerick's or Waterford's, but they're up there in terms of the, they have a really good forward. I think they have a really strong forward line, and look, the intrigue about the sideline, I think that's probably perfect from a management point of view. If you're putting yourself in a management position, that all the pressure seems to be all the focus from a media point of view seems to be on the two boys, and you can prepare very diligently behind the scenes. So it makes for a great game. It reminds me a small bit of Galway laid down a marker in the league against Limerick, and I think it has to be a similar approach, I think, this Sunday. And it also reminds me of, I think, Micheál O'Donoghu's post 17 when Kilkenny came to Galway the following year. It was there was an element of, let's see what we're about here, and Galway won that comprehensively. So it's, for me, motivation. I think Galway have the advantage, but I'm not sure in terms of the quality that Kilkenny have they the advantage. I think perhaps they have.
Yeah, he's building another little team here, isn't he? Colm, there's always, there's a certain amount of from some quarters satisfaction, and from others kind of, I suppose, disappointment that the great Bet Noir down in the southeast maybe aren't as strong as they were for like a decade and a half. But they're back-to-back Leinster title holders, and if it wasn't for the Green Monster over West, we could be talking about an All-Ireland or two, who knows. And he has regenerated yet again. And I've lost count of how many teams Brian Cody has built at this stage. The one thing you would say is that this one is still built around the successor to the man on the other sideline. He's still blessed in that he's gone from generational talent DJ Kerry to generational talent Henry Shefflin to generational talent TJ Reid. It's not his fault or anything, but it's hard to get away from the fact that it must be a little bit easier to build a team when you have, players like that around which you can build a focal point.
Well, I suppose that the great irony about this game is that Henry Shefflin is coming in trying to take down a Kilkenny team that is essentially, especially the further up the field you go, is backboned by many of his own former colleagues, obviously in Ballyhale Shamrocks, and players that he won back-to-back All-Irelands with. And really they are the pivotal players, as you mentioned, TJ, but also Owen Reid, or Owen Cody.
Cody, yeah.
His own nephew, and Adrian Mullen, who has been switched to midfield. And, you know, if you're looking at the opening 2 games, and I don't know how much you can really judge by that, but he looks a rejuvenated figure. He hadn't a great campaign really with Ballyhale during the winter, but certainly his release to midfield, his ball striking, and just his all-around hurling ability may just profit from that move. And you know, there aren't huge options for Brian Cody in Kilkenny. As you say, he is regenerating a team, but he's regenerating it maybe with positional switches as much as anything, because Pádraig Walsh is back up to centre forward, and that's been a very, very effective switch if you're using the league and obviously the first 2 games as a gauge. He's a wonderful striker of the ball. He's a player that can strike on the run without really ever having to slow down, and that's probably an element of his game as a defender that you don't see as much. But since he's moved up, I think it's not 25 he scored between league and championship in about 7 games, and you know, just his ability to get in and get stuck in everywhere, and just all around wonderful hurler. And that's probably underlined by the fact that he's played across so many lines. He was full back for a couple of seasons. He's been obviously centre back for a while. He had a couple of games at midfield as well. He's been at centre forward before, I think in the Wexford game in 2017. So he's been around. And the other switch is Paddy Deegan into centre back as well. So really there's that adaptability of those players. 2 of the players that came through during the league, Cian Kenny and David Blanchfield, the one thing they didn't feature from the start the last day. So but he has Mikey Butler, who's a very effective cornerback, always bringing through 2 or 3 players every year. Kilkenny's underage record, no, it's not comparable really these days to the likes of Limerick and Cork and even Tipperary, who have pressed on in that regard with under 20 and under 21 titles in recent years. But still, Kilkenny managing to bring through those few players to keep them really competitive. And as you say, 2 Leinster titles. The impression and the perception is certainly that Brian Cody era is petering out in some way, and yet he's won those 2 Leinster titles. They've won a league a few years back when it was a little bit more competitive maybe than what it is now around in 2018. So yes, he's done pretty well out of the resources that he has, even though that may not be the impression within the county. But if you're looking at it from afar, it's not a bad haul from, you know, an era that is supposedly in decline.
Yeah, Rory, I mentioned here just kind of up close how impressed I was with Galway's physicality against Wexford. You know, they're a big team. They know they're a big team. They know that's kind of an advantage they have on a lot. You look at the spine of this Kilkenny team, like Owen Murphy to Hugh Lawler to Paddy Deegan. These aren't lads who are going to be bullied. So this could be spicy, I think, if it plays out the way we think it will.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be a physical game. It always is between these 2. Well, I'm just looking in terms of doing a little bit of prep ahead of Sunday. What kind of struck me was, which I kind of took a small bit of a step back on, was I know Kilkenny are current Leinster champions, but their record against Galway of late is not good. I mean, they've met 5 times in the championship over the last 3 or 4 years. And that's the only win that Kilkenny have, which is last year's Leinster final. So I think from that point of view, sorry, not last year's Leinster final. It was last year. Kilkenny beat Dublin in last year's Leinster final. Isn't that correct?
2020 Leinster final. Right. Yeah. 2020 Leinster final. Yeah.
So they do have a very good recent record. I think Colm touched on it there. The fact that Henry, effectively in his own household, or certainly his nephew, and the intimate knowledge that he might have of TJ, having, you know, hurled with him for so long, and then obviously being his manager for a couple of years, and the fact that the Ballyhale guys backbone a lot of what is good about Kilkenny, I think that insider knowledge is going to be valuable. I mean, you're like, who's better positioned to know what to do in terms of curbing the influence of these guys than Henry Shefflin? And I think it adds to the level of intrigue. And I know Derek made mention of the fact that A lot of the focus is on the two managers, but I think that's justified in this situation because, look, you're talking about two of the greatest characters, two of the greatest, like certainly one of the greatest players, and Brian Cody was obviously a fantastic player in his own right as well. All-Ireland winning captains on either side of the dugout. I mean, I just think all of that is feeding into it. I just hope it's a good crowd. I hope there's a big crowd there. No, not too big, so we can get out of Salthill at a reasonable hour this week, as opposed to what happened in Castlebar last week. But I just hope it's a big crowd. I hope the weather holds off. Forecast isn't great, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a superb contest. I think the chances are they might meet again in the Leinster final. They look like the two form teams in Leinster, and I think they'll both go for it, and we should see a really, really good contest.
Yeah, Derek, it's, you've obviously been involved in huge matches where, kind of the build-up is kind of, it might be in danger of kind of sweeping your players up, and, there's the question of how much do you want them to be swept away and stuff, how much do you kind of want to keep them level, like obviously adrenaline's important and you want them to feel like it's special, etc. This is kind of different in that, like, there's no getting away from it. The players are almost kind of the afterthought in the build-up to this match. Like, it is all about the managers. It's kind of a funny one, isn't it? Because, it's the biggest game of the weekend because of two guys who aren't playing in a way.
Yeah, but it's probably an ideal scenario for the. And again, if you look at, they talked about a subtle rebuild in each camp, I suppose. But still, if you go back to the spine of the Galway team, you're probably going to have Dahi Burke, Gerard McInerney, Pádraig Mannion right half back, Conor Cooney centre forward, Brian Concannon, and those Joseph Cooney in the forward line. So you're going to have, similarly, you have Hugh Lawler, Paddy Deegan, Pádraig Walsh, Walter Walsh. You have a huge wealth of experience that has ample knowledge in how to deal with, the build up to a game. So I think, yeah, it's probably an ideal scenario for players. For me, the interesting thing, I suppose, outside of that, and Rory is right. Even when Rory was talking there, I was kind of thinking, right, what will he do then? So does Dahi Burke tag TJ wherever he goes? Like if TJ goes to full forward, and I would traditionally find that a left over right like Dahi Burke copes well with a left over right TJ Reid. So does Cody then, put him somewhere else? Does he put him in the corner on Jack Grealish? Does he, traditionally he would kind of, put TJ at a point where he kind of thinks he might do the most damage. Now, does Dahi go to corner back and therefore you have nobody in front of the goal? So all the what if scenarios, I suppose, even Owen Cody has played at 11 at times, he's played at 12, he's played at 15 at times. A guy who's really impressed me so far this year has been Darren Morrissey. I think he's been outstanding for Galway. Lucky enough to see him playing against our own club last year in the challenge match. Outstanding hurler, like really, really good player. And Galway's setup has been interesting also in terms of, with the breeze is a factor in Salthill. When they came to Wexford Park, they set up kind of with a +1 with Joseph Cooney, with Colm Mannion in the middle of the field. And, they were tactically very well set up, as most teams are defensively now anyway. But for me, they're the interesting kind of things that will ensue, I suppose, on Sunday. And like Rory, the crowd is an important factor, a huge Galway crowd, I suppose, on the back of kind of, the expectancy for this particular game and the build up to this game, you'd expect a big crowd.
Yeah. We have to move on to the big game of Munster now in a second, lads. So I'll just get a quick prediction from you, Colm.
Well, I was very impressed with Galway's reaction to the draw. Now, you might not say, well, they went out and they beat Westmeath as they did, but they're conscious, obviously, of how they lost in 2019, and they drove on, aware that score difference could make all the difference at the end of this. Having said all that, I just give Kilkenny a little edge here through that Ballyhale trio, Mullen, Owen Cody, and TJ Reid. I just think that they might just have a little edge here. I would think Galway's progression will continue as the season, as they find their team that bit more. Conor Whelan is obviously a big question mark over him as to how fit he's going to be for this game. So that's certainly a factor too. But for me, it's just Kilkenny marginally.
Rory?
Yeah, I think I go along with that. I think it would be a big statement as well to go over to Salthill and win. And I think Kilkenny are fed up of listening to all this Munster hurling stuff, and I think they'll have a bit of a bee in their bonnet, and they might take that out on Galway on Sunday. I think just with the injuries that Galway have, Kilkenny look slightly more settled. I think they've been building nicely. The games have fallen well for them. and I think they are probably the in pole position now in Leinster, and I think we'll probably see that on Sunday, Kilkenny to win.
Derek?
Yeah, I let go that, yep.
All right.
That, yep.
Okay, well that's a full house then, because as a lot of you know my stance here, I'm a whipped cur of a Wexford man. I never bet against Kilkenny. I am scarred through a long life. And also the Conor Whelan, Dahi Burke, Porrick Mannion question marks are very, very big question marks when you look at this Galway team. Okay, briefly enough, lads, we'll skip Laois v Wexford and Westmeath v Dublin, because heaven help me, I hope one of them isn't competitive anyway. And we'll breeze over to Cork v Clare in Semple Stadium. Obviously, we won't plough over that field again. We might touch a little bit on Cork venues in the football after Darragh O'Shea's column yesterday in the Irish Times. But we'll skip the venue and just come down to it. Derek, this is do or die for Cork at least, and for Clare. It'd be an important win. It'd be a win that almost let them go and enjoy, to an extent, you could say, maybe the rest of the Munster Championship, or at least play with a bit of freedom. Whereas if they lose this one, you know, things are going to tighten up for them as well. So this is do or die stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just going to go over the permutations. If, as expected, Limerick beat Tip next week, we'll say, right? So that's 6 points, probably guaranteed Munster final spot. And then do Limerick go to Ennis in the last match, as they did 2 years ago, you know, with a weak and enough squad, and Clare can still qualify. That's it. So look, a lot's been written and a lot's been said about Cork in the interim, I suppose, in terms of the 2 weeks. So I think if there's stuff in Cork, and I do believe, I'm not one of the guys that thinks there's not stuff in these Cork guys, Fitzgibbon knows. I believe there is stuff in these guys, and I think it's going to manifest itself on Sunday. I think it has to, and I think it will. Strategically, I've been all over the place. You know, I'm writing a bit for the Examiner tomorrow. I was saying, I'm not sure, have you the time to stick or twist? You know, as regards, I think there'll be subtle tweaks. I think you're putting yourself in a management position. You have 2 weeks. You know, you're looking at radical changes that have taken place in Gaelic games over the years. Donaghy to full forward. You know, all the things that kind of happen mid-season that act as a catalyst for a kick-on, if you like. You know, you're thinking Mark Keane, you're thinking Harnedy to full forward. You're thinking, you know, all the speculation around 3 and 6. And I don't go with that as much as other people, because I invariably think you only need 2 in your full back line these days, because one guy, I don't know of many teams that are playing an absolute 3 up front inside the 21, if you like. And similarly with the whole Mark Coleman debate, you know, before the game we were saying sure Millerick will pick Keane Lynch and Mark is good at sweeping up, similar to Ty Burke, similar to Declan Hannon, etc. So do you go with a kind of a more enforcer in that role and leave Mark Hurd from the wing or a midfield, you know? And I think that there might be subtle tweaks, but I don't think Kieran can make, you know, 7-8 changes, if you like. You know, I think the time span for me as an ex-manager is not there to do that. So that'll be the interesting thing for me. You know, all the speculation as regards Tim O'Mahony, etc. That's the really interesting thing for me. But motivationally, I think if you hear and you see what's been said, or even if some bit of the rumour mill permeates its way to the Cork group over the last 2 weeks, I think there's stuff in the Cork boys, and I think they're going to react, and I could be way off with that, but I think they will. As
a hurler on the ditch these days, Derek, I do wonder, do you smile kind of with the endless debate about where Mark Coleman should play? Because obviously you were Austin Gleeson's manager for a few years, and you had to listen to everybody giving you their 2 cents worth on where someone should play, and it's, you know.
Yeah, and if you want to give me a list of earnings now, people are purporting to kind of propose defensive systems for every team now, and so don't even get me going.
Yeah.
the populist language, or the unpopular language, is now the populist language, but that's okay with me too. Coleman, listen, I'll give you an example. When we set up against Coleman 17, we set up in the Munster Championship, we actually switched Brick from 10 to 12 to Mark Christopher Joyce, and we put a kind of Stephen Bennett on Mark Coleman, and we said, you know, Stephen, we had the legs to stay with Mark Coleman. Mark Coleman played very well that day, and when it came to the semi-final that year, we actually went with a guile of Brick lying right up on top of Coleman, almost kind of trying to stop him. So, look, the difficulty for me, I remember reading Jack O'Connor's book when he talked about Declan O'Sullivan having to take him out of the kind of the forefront of people's attention when you know there was so much speculation about him. And I'm wondering, you know, in terms of man management, there's so much talk about Mark Coleman and his non-ability to play the role. In actual fact, I think if you left him on the edge of the D and left him be the outball there for the keeper, the outball for everyone, and had someone actually had the wall. For me, the big issue with Cork is the wall of cover is not big enough. It's not vicious enough for Mark Coleman to do his job, if that makes sense, you know. And I know we all highlighted the issue with the goal, the Kyle Hayes goal, where he got sucked. But if you get sucked like that, you need your midfielders back, and you need your wing forwards back covering, tracking, so that they bump into somebody. So for me, I expect Cork to have a bigger wall, a greater ferocity in terms of what Robbie O'Flynn and what the boys can do in the half forward line in front of them. And so Mark Coleman, to answer your question, you know, Mark Coleman is a really good hurler wherever he plays, and I'm hoping he has a good game on a personal level for himself, because you know he's a good chap and he's a great hurler. So we're best. You put him at wing back on the wing forward that's least likely to do you damage, and leave him hurl from there. That's what they did in the semi-final last year. They actually marked TJ Reid with Limerick last year. They marked at centre back, and they left Coleman at right half back, marking John Donnelly. He left John Donnelly go down the field, and he hurled an ocean of ball from right half back, which is what Diarmaid Burns does for Limerick.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, Colm, because Clare were very impressive the last day. Question marks are obviously about the strength of the opposition, but as was pointed out here on Monday, they did it without Tony Kelly having to lift 14 men on his shoulders by any account. You know, they brought through new players like Mounsey. Peter Duggan is back. Shane O'Donnell is fit and strong and buffed up and playing wing forward. Like it's there's a whole new look to it. And you talk about a wall, and Derek talks about a wall and being strong and vicious enough. There's very few questions about the Clare defence side. They look to be in very good shape, but this will be a proper test.
Yeah, obviously, Derek has spoken about permutations with regard to the Cork team and movement of players, and we've referenced it with Kilkenny as well about how Brian Cody has tweaked, and Brian Lohan has done it too with John Conlon's repositioning, and that started last year, but it really was effective last weekend against Tipperary. He was dominant, and for a guy that was such an effective target man up front for Clare for years, to make that transition back to centre back was really, really, really impressive from him. They also have moved David Fitzgerald up front, and maybe there's a clue in that for Cork, because I feel one of the changes Cork should make is to move Tim O'Mahony up front to give them a target and a presence there. There are very few teams that are operating without some kind of target like that. Fitzgerald up on the half forward line, very, very effective too, and obviously they have Duggan inside, and that brings a size factor that obviously Limerick can bring, and obviously Kilkenny have TJ, his ability to win aerial ball too. So I think Cork, that's probably something that Cork need a little bit more of, and that's O'Mahony played a lot of his underage hurling for Cork, and even for his club he's played up front as well. So I think that's one potential factor there. Clare very, very impressive last weekend. They really broke from the front, and having two players like Duggan and Shane O'Donnell, who weren't there obviously last year, and Duggan hasn't been there for a few years now because of his travels. Having two dynamic players like that, you saw Shane O'Donnell's catch. You just see his movement out at half forward there, a new release for him, and he looks so lively. And as you said, Tony Kelly didn't fire like we expect him to, but that's the rate of expectation too. And also you have players like Cathal Malone, who has been one of the best midfielders over the last couple of years in the game too. So quietly, Clare have put themselves in a very, very strong position. They know their best team. That's a real strength for them, that they've known their best team for some time. It's becoming a really settled team, even with Rory Hayes at cornerback there. Again, like Malone for the last 2 or 3 years, he's been one of the best in his position. So quietly, they have come so strong there. They've come so strong there again with knowledge of the team, and they're like Kilkenny. They're only adding a player here or there every year, and they're able to knit it in that way. And they're in a really good place now.
Yeah, and they've obviously got a bit of strength from the bench, the likes of Shane Golden and Jack Brown. I'll come to you in a second, Rory. I just want to get Derek's prediction because I know he has to shoot off. So, Derek, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, I think Cork will rebound. I expected them, and I was going to say I hope, but I don't. But I not that I don't hope it either. But I expect Cork to bounce back. I'm hoping, as I said, I think there's good stuff in some of them younger lads on the Cork squad, Fitzgibbon, Kingston, those, and I expect it to come out on Sunday.
All right. Derek, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll catch you again. Good luck.
Thanks a lot.
No worries. Rory, yourself, how do you see this one going?
Look, I think from Cork's perspective, I think the one positive that they can probably take from last Sunday and Clare's performance is that they know what's coming. I don't really see any changes to the Clare starting team. So they got a really good look at exactly how Clare are going to set up their position. You've obviously got Peter Duggan back in, Shane O'Donnell back in. So Cork will know exactly. The only maybe conundrum that they might have is where does Tony Kelly end up going and how they employ him to try and drag. Like, obviously, it was very effective last week in terms of creating space inside by him pulling Seamus Kennedy all over the field, and he didn't really hurl that much ball himself. But from Cork's perspective, at least that is one plus in that they're forewarned is forearmed. Having said that, it did look to me on week one that Cork have a lot. Like, I mean, that team, in a Formula One sense, needs to go into the garage for quite a bit, and there's quite a bit to fix. And the clock now is very much ticking. And I'm not entirely sure if they're going to be able to make the necessary repairs in time to stop a sort of a Clare, the momentum that Clare have built up. And I'd be a little bit fearful because I think momentum is a massive thing, particularly in this round robin. I think if you were in the Clare camp this week, I think the atmosphere would be very, very different to the one in the Cork camp. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of there'd be a lot of question marks. There'd be a lot of people unsure, of themselves. There's a lot of local criticism, whereas in Clare, it's completely the opposite. Now, I think Derek's point is well made that, their backs are against the wall to a certain extent. And if they don't come out, and play with a bit of Cork spirit, and if they can't get that win that they obviously need because their season's over really if they don't, then they've no business being in the championship from there on anyway. So, and I think they understand that. That's why it makes it very, very hard to call. And I'm not really sitting on the fence here when I say I would not be surprised to see this one finish level pegging at the very, very end.
Yeah,
which would be no good to either team, by the way.
No. I can't see beyond the Clare win myself. I have a goldfish memory. I'm just like, Clare were really good last week. Cork were bad in their first game. Clare are going to win. But what do you think, Colm? And also, just like to get your opinion on some teams lose, say Wexford lose, and it's down to tactics. It's down to kind of a lack of a free taker. It's it's listed off fairly logical explanations. Cork lose, and it's immediately character, stomach, battle. It's kind of unusual, isn't it? They really do tend to get it in the guts when they lose the game.
Yeah, and I just coming away from Páirc Uí Chaoimh 2 weeks ago, that Kieran Kingston couldn't emphasize enough how 2 weeks was a godsend to them, because if they had to go out last weekend and play again, I don't think they would have beaten anybody. But that extra week gives them a chance to breathe and a chance to make those small changes. They're not seismic changes that have to be made, as Derek did say. So it just gives them a little chance to reset. But certainly patience seems to be wearing a lot thinner in Cork now than it was after last year's All-Ireland final defeat to Limerick, when everyone accepted that was one of the great performances and Cork's time is going to come anyway. And that was a lesson that you'll package away for future reference again. And they
Colm, just on that, and I think there needs to be. Look, there are some good players coming through. That's absolutely, I'd accept that, right? You do have some good players, but we've seen many, many times in the past in both codes, hurling and football. Like, I mean, I don't know how many minor titles Galway have won. I don't like. Limerick had a fantastic run back in the early 2000s where they won 3 under-21s in a row, and they got nothing out of it. I mean, they made a couple of All-Ireland finals. I think that was about the size of it. Did they even win a Munster championship? I don't think they did. So there can be a danger in that you get your underage house in order and you just assume that it's going to happen at senior level. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that's it. And
happened to Limerick, didn't it?
Yeah, that was 2000 to 2000, 2001, and 2002.
Yeah,
and they didn't really follow, and they reached the 2007 All-Ireland final. Look, obviously, hurling and football are strewn with stories like that. Even you could say have Clare got everything that they should have got out of the trio of All-Ireland under 21? Now, obviously, they won an All-Ireland title in the middle of that, and went on and won a league in 2016. So it's a lot better than what Limerick was. But they won 3 All-Ireland under 21 titles. And
Galway are perennial minor titans.
Is that minor more so than under 20. Under 21 is probably the better guide. It's probably the better guide. But again, it comes down to individual players as much as anything. And you can identify a few very, very good individual players who will really drive on Cork. And there's 2 of them in the team at the moment, Shane Barrett and Kieran Joyce. You will build a team around them in the future. And they're young men, you know, they're still very young. So I do think, I kind of with Derek on this, I think whatever is in Cork will come out and has to come out this weekend. Backs to the wall is a great place to be in one respect. And I take the criticism locally and how different it is in Clare. But sometimes the imperative of winning really, really sits with a team. And I think it's there with Cork this weekend, provided that they make changes and those adjustments and that they're not caught, you know, turning back into defence too often, as happened the last day, and they were really caught like that far too often, and there certainly wasn't enough movement up front and not enough targets. I don't think that they could trust to put the ball up there with a little bit of dispute about those balls that they could go and win them. That just don't have enough of that.
Yeah,
well, the one that they have to make.
Yeah, the thing there, Rory, as well, that there was a psychological element that it was Limerick, and that they were kind of probably questioning themselves before they even looked up the field, or you know that the Limerick may have some kind of a psychological kind of hold over Cork, perhaps, or at least Cork know that Limerick's tactics are kryptonite to them. They won't feel like that about Clare, so they might already be less inhibited, and they might be a little bit more free and play the game that they want to play.
But look, Limerick have a psychological hold over everybody. I tell you, I think if you took the best of the rest and you made a combined team, they'd probably give Limerick a game, but they might necessarily beat them if Limerick were at full strength. I don't think that's an issue, but I do think there are other fundamentals that have shown up time and time and time again. The biggest problem, and I look, it is a local gripe, but it is one that it might seem, fairly rudimentary and slightly innocuous, but the forwards, Shane Barrett aside, just do not work hard enough. The forwards do not. Modern forwards now, because of the nature of the way the game has gone and the fact that the middle third of the field has become a much more congested area where people are all dropping back in, and that's effectively become a war zone for possession, a bunch of breaks then, and then you clip your point off when the ball pops out. Like the Cork forwards just do not engage in that. They're not built for it. I mean, can you see, for all his incredible skill and all his service and all the contribution that Patrick Horgan has given to Cork hurling, is he going to be getting into the trenches and flaking and belting and chasing lads down and hooking and blocking? He does it a little bit, but I don't know, is it a bit of window dressing to a certain extent? Like, I just don't think he's built for that. And you're that's a mindset shift. I don't necessarily think it's something that they can't do, because obviously it's application and desire and work rate. They're kind of, fixable things, because the things you can't fix are natural skill and ability, which Cork have in abundance. But that will require a mindset shift. And I think if they start their defense from the front on Sunday, and you have 15 players working in unison and in song together, I think they will be difficult to beat. Yeah. But I'm not so sure if we're going to get that.
Okay, before this turns into hurling's version of the Neil Prendeville show, we better let it go. We'll be back in a minute with Colm ORourke to talk about Gaelic football.
He hits it, it's over the bar! Oh, holy Moses!
Welcome back. We've been joined by Colm ORourke, so you could say we have a surfeit of columns from Meath at the moment. But can you ever have too many columns from Meath, Colm ORourke?
Maybe 2 is too many.
Mikey, just one point though that I do think is worth making. Colm ORourke was on with us on the night of the league final, and his analysis afterwards of Mayo, which in typical Colm ORourke fashion was blunt and to the point and short and shrift, was Mayo are limited, they don't kick the ball in, and they're predictable. And of course, you had the usual new fad cottage coaches up and down the country, right? In the village of Twitter idiots, as Don Logue correctly pointed out, jumping on his case about, he doesn't understand the modern game. He's out of touch. He hasn't a clue. He doesn't understand stats and the 4.7% on the turnover of the kick-out strategy that turns into the scoring rates and all this. And of course, they lose last Sunday. And pretty much the synopsis is, why did Mayo lose? They're predictable and they don't kick the ball in.
But the other side of it, Rory, is why does anybody pass any remarks in the fucking ages on Twitter? Like, what's that got to do with reality?
I know.
I'm always amazed by you passing any remarks and saying we got this reaction on Twitter. Do you know any of your friends who are real GEA people who go on Twitter to make comments about the GEA? I don't.
Yeah. So you think Elon Musk is Elon Musk wasting his money then, Colm, is he? He's thrown his 45 billion away.
My mother used to say, a fool and his money are easily parted.
He's plenty of it to be parted from. You'll be all right. From Elon Musk, we'll go to another independent thinker in Dara O'Shea. I don't think we can avoid it. It was quite the column yesterday in the Irish Times. He was kind of he just dwelt on the decision to allow the Cork footballers host Kerry and Páirc Uí Rinn. And he didn't hold back. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs from it. In the last few years, Cork footballers have been a disgrace in the way they performed, in the way they've stood up for the great history of Cork football. They haven't played for their jersey. One win against Kerry in 10 years of football is a terrible return. There's no two ways about it. They could have taken any number of stands over the years. They could have fought for better coaching or better strength and conditioning or any of that background stuff. They could have drawn a line in the sand over the tactics they were being sent out to play with, or the way it seems to have been accepted that they don't belong in Division 1 anymore. Basically, Colm saying they picked an odd fight and they should have been just as happy to get G'd up to go down to Kilkenny or play the game in Thurles or whatever, and they don't even like playing in Páirc Uí Rinn. So there's no equating this to Newbridge or nowhere. It was just, he thinks, a waste of breath. I know you came out and supported the Cork footballers. I can't imagine you've changed your stance since that they've won.
I'm surprised that Kerry gets so exercised over something as minor as this. The same they seemed to get exercised over Tyrone last year and got a bit distracted. I don't think there's any chance that they're going to lose the game, but I'm surprised that they passed any remarks. I thought Kerry would have just said, listen, fix the game wherever you like to the Cork County Board, and we'll turn up and play there and we'll beat you. It's no big deal. I think it's much ado about nothing.
Yeah. I think, Colm,
I think Darragh O'Shea is right about the footballers. They haven't been very good. Nobody can defend that.
I think, Colm, that's what Kerry did effectively say, that when it came down to it, they said, look, if you have to fix it in Park. They didn't want, and I would think it came from the team management pretty strongly, we don't want any distractions here if we have to go to Páirc Uí Rinn. But what amuses me in all of this is that the issue was never the home and away, the venue issue. Or the venue element to the home and away arrangement, which was written many, many years ago, that it could only be Killarney or Páirc Uí Chaoimh where Cork and Kerry played championship games, and then Páirc Uí Rinn came into the mix. But when the Munster Council made their statement initially flagging the change at the end of March, there was never any mention about venues at that point or the home and away arrangement. It was about capacity, that this Páirc Uí Rinn wasn't going to accommodate the crowd that they expected there. And it was only after that, to my mind, that the venue issue was unearthed. And consequently, it was what bailed Munster out in all of this, because we would still be in a protracted issue around this if it wasn't for Kerry reaching to that venue element and saying, look, it's okay, we'll set this aside for you. That was never the initial issue. It was always about capacity, and the capacity is going to be pretty much around 11,000, maybe up to 12,000 for this game anyway. So it's back to where it started, and I don't think anyone really has come out of it well. apart from Kerry, who have said, to my mind, Kerry have said, look, let it on here.
Yeah, Rory, I'd say 11,000 would probably be ample enough.
Fine.
I don't think there's going to be too many people banging on the door, is there?
Yeah, it's 6 o'clock on a Saturday. You're looking at most of the football fraternity that would follow both teams, largely farming communities. 6 o'clock on a Saturday, it's absolutely fine. I think to Dara's point, in terms of the footballers' performances, you wouldn't necessarily disagree. The one thing I would say there is, unlike a lot of other counties, I used to always laugh when I'd hear, certain northern analysts slag Cork off because of the way they might lay down to Kerry. But a lot of these teams might meet Kerry once every 20 years. I would like to see how, a Derry or a Mead, for instance, would get on against Kerry over the last 10 years. Would they have any more than one victory out of 10? Like Cork are in the unusual situation where they have to play them every year. And unfortunately, look, you're playing the standard bearers by and large for the game, and they're flying at the peak of their powers now again. So look, I suppose they were looking for something a crutch to kind of jump onto. The venue was something that they probably felt might maybe reduce the gap. Dara's column might knock another couple of points off the margin, but it probably won't change the result. So look, as Colm said, much ado about nothing.
Yeah. We'll move on to where the real action is this weekend, lads, which is the Leinster Football Championship. The jewel in the GAA's crown, which is actually serving up quite a few interesting matches this weekend. The problem with it, Colm, I've been looking back a little bit, is that these kind of seeded preliminary rounds and quarterfinals, they're rarely a happy hunting ground for the teams who come through from the preliminary round. You have to go back to 2019 when somehow Kildare and Mead ended up in the preliminary round. They did come through, but for the most part, the seedings aren't far off the mark. So this weekend you'd be looking at, Wexford being up against it, Louth being up against it, Wicklow being up against it. But that probably doesn't tell the full story, I think, because there's definitely, I would say not everybody in Meath is sitting pretty thinking it's a done deal against Wicklow, and I would certainly say that there's some unease in Kildare at the fact that they're playing Louth, who were, they're one of the highest scoring teams in the country. They're managed by Mickey Hart, and they look better. They're a Mickey Hart team. They look better than the sum of their parts, and the sum of their parts isn't bad on its own.
Well, I think that you have to take into account Dublin and all of this. If you took Dublin out of it for the last 10 years, you could have had a great Leinster championship.
I'll be cracking.
Yeah. Now, they were all moderate enough teams, I suppose, at that time. But it was just that Dublin are so far in front of everyone. If you put Dublin in most provinces, it would have caused a bit of a calamity along the way. But there are good matches. I don't think anyone in Mead would be taking Wicklow for granted, even though Wicklow ended up with 3 points in the third division of the league and getting relegated. Mead ended up with 6 in Division 2 and finished off a bit better. I was at the games though against Offaly and Down, and Mead were quite fortunate to get wins in those. Big win over Cork, win over Clare, and then finished off with a loss to Derry. I was at that match in Navan as well, and it was a sort of a dead rubber, nobody passing through, which marks it resembled the challenge match. So still expect Mead to win. I think Kildare are possibly a bit unfortunate to have been relegated. They played quite well in a few games in Division 1. They could have easily stayed up. They put on particularly good performance against Monaghan, ran up, was it 24 points, was it, in that game? Really played well. And I suppose the most interesting of all would be the Dubs, because the Dubs malaise nearly started in this game last year. If you go back to it, they were poor in that match. They ran up, I think it was something like 14 points. They played poorly, and we all said, they're just going through the motions. And the same thing sort of went on then. They had a poor second half in almost all their games. Wexford, Mead, Kildare, and then, of course, they got bitten by Mayo in the second half. So maybe we will see a different Dublin. I would presume that we will. I would say that they will try to start off with a bit of va-va-voom this Sunday, or this Saturday evening.
Yeah, Colm, well, let's start with that one in Wexford Park then, just by chance. It's, I think Johnny Doyle said, yesterday that anybody thinking Dublin aren't going to be a factor are codding themselves. And as impressive as Wexford were, they were impressive. They beat Offaly. I wouldn't quite call it the tallest dwarf contest, but in relation to Dublin, perhaps it was always an enviable prize to have the dub 6 days later. Wexford kind of caught Dublin by surprise last year, as I mentioned here on Monday, by tackling them, by being physical, by not standing off and admiring how nice the Dubs were. So you'd imagine the Dubs would be prepared for this weekend, and as I think yourselves in the Irish Independent were reporting, Conor Callahan should be back. Whether he starts or not is another thing, but that's huge as well, as much for confidence as for his scoring contributions.
Yeah, he's been back. He was out with the squad. They went on a warm weather training week to Portugal, and
are they allowed again? Are they?
They are, yeah, and they even applied for it and got clearance and all of that. So yeah, there are obviously teams can still go obviously between league and championship if the time allows. There are no club clashes now, of course, so they don't need that.
The Dubs only meant to not qualify for the league final so they could go on holiday, but they got it all wrong and they ended up getting relegated.
I think with Wexford, I was at that game last year with Wexford, and it was just the whole atmosphere. There was nobody at it. There was a limited crowd at it. It was dead, and Dublin came in and almost they played to that day. It was one of their flattest. Probably their flattest performance, at least at times against in subsequent games against Mead, Kildare, and Mayo in the first half, as Colm pointed out. They did show something, but they showed nothing that day and really, really struggled. And it did set the tone for a lot of the rest of the season. Wexford last weekend, very good win against Offaly, obviously, and they had Ben Brosnan back. Ben has been there, is it 15 since 2008? I think he made.
Yeah, but wasn't there last year.
He wasn't there last year, but I just from looking at some of his postmaster reaction, he says, how hard he's worked. I think he's 30. Is he 34 now? He shed 10 kgs during COVID to get himself fitter, and he's attributing that to that surge in form. So that's a pretty substantial. Drop, and he looked really, really sharp to score 1-8. But against that, I do think Dublin will correct a lot of what was wrong with them in the league. Obviously, they're flagging a little bit in certain positions. I think defensively, they have weakened a lot. There isn't obvious replacements there, and their bench isn't all that deep, and that's evident in the league. Obviously, when they get O'Callaghan back and they get Evan Comerford back in goals, a few players like that, but they had most of them coming back. And one of the notable things now is that James McCarthy has been appointed captain. And the aftermath of Stephen Cluxton's departure, of course, that fell to Johnny Cooper, who had been vice captain. So that's a pretty significant move from the management to overlook Johnny Cooper at this point and to give the captaincy to James McCarthy. I do think they'll improve a lot. I do think they'll be right there when it comes to the business end of the championship. I think they'll sail through the Leinster Championship, despite Kildare beating them in Newbridge. I don't think the gap has closed that significantly. I still think they'll be well ahead here. And I last year it didn't get into double figures in Wexford Park. This year I think it will, as a statement as much as anything else.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, Mikey, that Colm did mention that the warm weather thing. I remember when Eddie Brennan first came in with us on the Sunday game, and he made mention of the fact that Kilkenny never do this. Never. They never go abroad. Like it's the crucible of Nolan Park and nowhere else. That's Brian Cody's mantra. And look, it's worked very well for them. So who's to say otherwise? But I remember Eddie saying that as their team was coming to the end, he always felt that maybe a week certainly for some of the older players mightn't have been the worst thing, just get a bit of sun in their backs and, just clear up a few injuries, gel the panel a little bit together again. And I just think it's interesting that Dublin chose to do that, especially given the age profile of some of their more senior players and their leaders, the Dean Rocks, Johnny Cooper's, James McCarthy himself, obviously Brian Fenton, an awful lot of football played now at this stage of his career, Kieran Kilkenny likewise. And I think that could be a nice little injection of morale into that whole camp ahead of the campaign in general.
Where's the warmest place you ever went for training, Colm?
Scotland.
We went to Bettystown in February and March. And I tell you one thing, I couldn't say it live, but you know what a wind like that could do. That was warm weather training, and then after that, if you survived that, I think you were ready for a champion. But
yeah,
I do see the benefits.
What about Madrid in 2005? That was a good warm weather expedition, wasn't it?
We went on another warm weather weekend to Scotland in '91 before the fourth Dublin match. So those are the sort of trips of legend. But we never went to La Manga or Portugal or whatever, nothing like that. But I do see benefits in it. It has to be beneficial. And the other thing I'd say about the Dubs is I think that they have almost the entire team that won the last All-Ireland available to them. No, they haven't, as Colm was saying, they haven't a backup on the bench anymore, but they still have, I think, the sort of, they have 13, 14, 15 of that group still available. And I think the sort of unofficial word was that maybe the training hadn't been going as well. Now, whether that was the quality of the training or the motivation, I don't know. But if they are motivated and hungry, like, they're still either the best or the second best group of players in the country.
Yeah.
I just like to compliment Ben Brosnan as well. I think he's a wonderful advert. It's so easy for fellas to keep playing with successful teams and are getting medals and things like that. But like for the likes of Ben Brosnan, isn't it just fantastic to see that service to a county? He knew for the vast majority of his career that he had no chance of winning a Leinster championship, but yet he's been a standard bearer for them, an outstanding forward for all those years.
What's worse is he had a chance to win a Leinster championship in the first couple of years of his career, and then knew after that the chance was gone.
He's the new Matty Ford, really, for them.
At 34, he's our new Matty Ford, but yes, you're right. He's a tremendous man to kick a point when he's getting knocked over. It's one of his trademark moves, I think, is to be able to get a shot off as he's being tackled. I'm unless anybody's going to contradict me, I'm going to say we're all going for a Dublin win here, are we? And I'll wait to be proven wrong gleefully, as I was last week. I can't start backing them now. That would just be Johnny-come-lately behaviour altogether.
Well, Dublin need to avoid the Tailteann Cup, but they're okay because they're still in Division 2.
I think the most intriguing game then in terms of closeness in terms of competition and the likelihood of quote unquote upset column keys would be Kildare v Louth. Louth are very impressive. Then the first day out they kind of carried on with what they had been doing, which was scoring lots of goals and kind of just looking like a very cohesive team. But as Colm ORourke said, Kildare may have been relegated from Division 1, but they showed in patches that they are, kind of a coming team. You can see the brand of the new management there. So this is, Kildare should win it, but if Louth win it, I don't think anybody will fall off their chair.
Well, Louth have a habit every so often of coming up and beating Kildare in landmark games. And Glenn Ryan probably won't like this statistic, but Louth beat Mick O'Dwyer in his first game in Drogheda to a late flurry of goals, and Stephen White scored that day. And in 1995, for Dermot Earley, when he was in charge, his first game, Louth also beat Kildare in Newbridge, and that was the first live televised Sunday game, from what I recall, on one Sunday evening in St. Conleth's Park. And then in 2010, early enough in Kieran McGeeney's reign, Louth came into Navan and beat Kildare very, very well that day. So they have a habit of, from time to time, of picking off Kildare, and they're going pretty well. Obviously, since the Limerick game in the league down in UL, that was moved, and they were behind in that. And Sam Mulroy knocked over a load of late frees, and they went and won that, and they've won every game since. So they've won a championship game, a league final, and they won their last five. They're unbeaten in their last 7 games, and they're improving all the time. And Mickey Hart has obviously made a real difference, and he's getting a lot out of players that maybe wouldn't have fired the way they are now. And the example would be Tommy Durnan, midfielder, who's been outstanding for them, and he didn't even start the first two league games, so he's really come on strong. But there's a lot of pace in the team, especially up front with Sam Mulroy, obviously. Kieran Byrne, Kieran Downey, players like that. They've really got it together. But having said that, Kildare were operating at a very high level. And can you really back against a team that drew with Kerry and beat Dublin in their own home patch? And as Colm referenced earlier, ran up a really big score. And Newbridge isn't the easiest place to score either. To score 24 points against Monaghan that day, even though I think Monaghan may have had issues around illness or COVID or something like that they missed a number of players, and they went out the following weekend and beat Dublin. So having said that, they operated at such a high level there. They may not have Jimmy Hyland. He could be an injury doubt. That'd be a loss because he was very, very good for them during the league. But Daniel Flynn, I mentioned players with pace on the Louth team. There's no one quicker with a ball in hand than he is. Maybe Jack McCaffrey in his day when he was playing, but Daniel Flynn is one of the quickest players around. And they'll have Kevin Feely as well under kickouts midfield. I think they have the structure to go in this game.
Rory, I think given how Kildare, that Monaghan game was referenced, I think it was their highest scoring tally since I think they beat Kilkenny in 1983 or something crazy like that. There was 16 goals in the first 3 Leinster Championship matches this year, Rory. So it's where you come for entertainment, and like judging these two forward lines, like this I know Newbridge, as you say, isn't exactly a scoring field, but this could be a shootout, which would be great.
I think this is in O'Connor Park. Is this in Tullamore? It is, yeah. So I mean, look, the one thing I would say,
so Newbridge won't be a problem then.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is, and I remember Kieran Whelan referenced it on the night of just after the league finals, in relation to Louth, is that like they're like a kind of a Tyrone light in that they're playing a very similar system. You know, they're dropping everybody deep and they're leaving 1 or 2 up, which is obviously Sam Mulroy. I do think that's a sort of a limited enough game plan. It'll only get you so far. It might be good enough to put it up to Kildare for 50 or 60 minutes, but you'd surely think a team that's been operating at a much higher level for a much longer period of time should have enough to eventually wear them down and break through that. Jimmy Hyland, if Colm is correct, that would be a blow. But I think if Kildare have any designs on making the last 8 and certainly competing in Leinster, they need to be going out and do a professional job on Louth on Sunday.
Colm, ORourke, are you going to pour cold water on the romance here as well? Predicting Kildare win.
I think so. I often look at how many points a team scores in a game, and you always see the good teams will run up in championship 15, 16, 18 points. And I'd say that Louth must be concerned slightly that even though they ran up a big total against Carlow, they got 5 goals, but they only got 10 points. And 10 points is a poor enough return over 70 minutes of championship football. And some days the goals dry up and you need to be able to pile on the points. And I think that's a big concern for them. I think Kildare, again, operating at a much higher level, I think that it would be, to me, it would be a very big shock if Louth beat them.
Okay, well, I predicted Louth to be promoted from Division 3, and I was proved right. So I don't think Mickey's going to let me down now. I'm going to say I'm going for the shock because that's what I do, because I can crow about it then. When it comes through on that 1 time in 10, I'd be a terrible gambler. Good thing I'm not a gambler. Okay, to the other big game in Leinster then, a similarly intriguing one, I think. Colm, ORourke, I'll go to you first. Mead v Wicklow. You say, 10 points isn't a great score to rack up, especially against a team like Carlow. Wicklow managed 5-15, but they did concede 4-12. So there's things for Mead to work on, shall we say.
Absolutely, and one of Mead's big problems in all the earlier league matches was the fact that they were running up very small scores, 7 points, 9 points, 1-9, that sort of thing. And I know the weather conditions in the first part of the league were just dreadful. We had all those gales for the first 3 rounds of the league, but Mead took quite a hockeying from both Roscommon and Galway early on. Now the ship was steadied with draws, fortunate enough against both Down, and awfully good win over Cork, which may not have been the greatest achievement, but finished up with a defeat to Derry. I don't know where Wicklow pulled this performance from, because obviously they ended up bottom of Division 3 with 3 points and relegated, but they were playing the other team that was relegated. But in beating Laois, who had given them a hammering in the league. It was quite a reversal of form. Yet at the same time, again, it would be to me a very major surprise if Mead don't beat Wicklow at home.
And comfortable.
Yes, it's quite a turnaround for Wicklow all the same, isn't it, Colm Keys? The fact that, you know, Alan Costello and Gary Duffy came in here like a very short notice. Obviously, they were selectors; they haven't come in out of the cold. But like Colin Kelly, that was pretty abrupt. From what I know, living in Wicklow, I haven't got my ear that far to the ground, but I do know that it wasn't expected. It was a kind of a left the WhatsApp group kind of job, and that's how the players found out. So there must have been a little bit of turmoil internally. The league finished badly, so Laois weren't pulling up trees either. It was just the manner of the victory. There's obviously a bit of spirit in this Wicklow team, and there's also some very talented forwards, which will get you so far.
Yeah, obviously, when a management leaves mid-season or a manager as happens here, as Colin Kelly did middle of the league after 4 games, I actually think it can often have a galvanizing effect. If you look at Offaly some years ago when Stephen Wallace left and Paul Rouse took over, and there was a little improvement through the qualifier.
Naas this year in the club. Did they have a similar situation?
The thing is, Rory, Naas were going very well. When the manager left, they were making progress at that point, and that was probably a different. I don't think there was player conflict there. Not knowing the full facts and details about that, but I don't think it amounted to player. It was more an issue with the club in that regard. But they were going well. Whereas obviously Offaly, and I'm only citing this one example. There are many examples of a manager leaving in mid-season. But in this case, actually Wicklow did finish the league a little bit better and picked up from there. And they have some talented forwards. Obviously, Kevin Quinn, the highlights reel from him last weekend and the goals he scored. But also, Mark Kenny scored 5 points off left and right. And he's a really very, very well-balanced player too. And they've Owen Darcy. Owen Darcy and Kevin Quinn would be 2 of their best players, and they're very, very young. They were under 20 last year, and they were kept the under 20s last year, rather than allow them to play senior football. So they're in now. They're integrated in now. So it's a decent full forward line. They also have Mark Jackson in goals. He's one of the better goalkeepers around now, and he gives them distance from frees, which is something actually Mead have introduced with their keeper. Harry Hogan has been added that dimension for long range frees, and actually closer range frees. He's almost become I think he's become the main free taker column, hasn't he? Essentially, but Mark Jackson offers that too. But having said all that, Mead beat Wicklow quite easily again through goals in the 2020 championship.
Seven goals or something.
Yeah. So you'd obviously expect Wicklow, that's not going to happen again. But Mead are operating at a level. They're not really a top, are they a top 11, 12 team? They're just about outside that bracket. And they've been stuck around that for a while, even though they got up to Division 1 and into All-Ireland quarter-final series. But they're not really making any advance. They should be good enough to beat Wicklow, I think, with a bit to spare. Yeah. How much further they go beyond that, I'm not sure.
You're nodding in agreement, Rory.
Yeah, 28 points was the gap 2 years ago. And that match was in Fortress Auckram. Meath are at home this time. The gap will be a bit closer. They look a little bit more spirited. They've got I think it's that Nicky Devereaux that used to play with Dublin, wing half back for them as well. So they've added a few extra strings to their bow. And but no, I don't think I was reading up there. I think Wicklow haven't beaten Meath in the championship since 1957, and it ain't going to be happening this weekend.
Just a word then, I don't want to ignore games, but at the same time, we have a lot of football. We're not going to get to a detailed discussion on everyone. So just to round off, Leinster in a word, Westmeath or Longford, Colm ORourke?
Westmeath.
Colm Keys?
Yeah, Westmeath to reverse. Longford beat them in the league by 4 points, but I think Westmeath, they'd be more geared towards championship. So I think I would say Westmeath too.
And Rory?
Yeah, I think so. I was just again looking ahead. I think it's their first meeting. Leinster can be funny. These two teams, given the proximity and everything, they haven't met in the championship for 14 years. Which is very unusual. A first championship meeting between them. And they've met 3 times, I think, between league games and O'Byrne Cup games in the last 12 months. But I think Westmeath will just have too much. But that'll be tight. I wouldn't be surprised to see extra time in that one.
Okay. We'll move north to Ulster to maybe the most intriguing match, perhaps, of the weekend outside of Leinster. Obviously, Colm ORourke is Derry v Tyrone. Tyrone have had their leg stretched. They've opened up against Fermanagh, particularly in the second half. They kind of flex their muscles, show what they can do. Derry, a lot of hype about them. Beginning of the league, partly due to how the fixtures fell for them, and kind of obviously they missed out on promotion then against Galway and Roscommon. Would you give them a chance of putting it up to Tyrone here? Because like traditionally in the championship in the last, I don't know, 20 years, they've kind of flattered to deceive, particularly against Tyrone. They're great rivals.
Yeah, I think that the Derry-Tyrone rivalry, which was really intense 20, 30 years ago, has become a bit like Cork and Kerry and has fallen completely flat recently. And obviously there are indications Derry have significant improvement, but at the same time they're now playing the All-Ireland champions. They're moving up a gear. Tyrone, to me, didn't seem to take the early games of the league too seriously. They were intent on just staying in the first division and geared up for the championship. I was more impressed, I think, than most people with their performance against Fermanagh. I think when they started to really go at Fermanagh in the sort of 10 minutes before half-time and the 15 minutes after half-time, they were quite devastating and showed a lot of potential. And their two midfielders seem to have, Kennedy and Kilpatrick, seem to have improved significantly. I think Tyrone are still going to be a big force in the championship. Obviously, the likes of Conor Glass and Shane McGuigan are probably as good as most other counties have. But I watched Derry in Navan against Mead, and I can't say that I was particularly impressed with them. They were a bit unfortunate against Roscommon in the league. If they had to win that day, they could have been promoted. And circumstances, if you go back to it, remember Shane McGuigan was sent off on a second yellow or a black card, was it? And wasn't able to take the free at the end that would have won them the game. And they're still, I think, a level below Tyrone. So Tyrone for me.
Okay. I don't know why you had to bring up Derry Roscommon. We're still getting it's the village of idiots of Twitter there, Colm. We still get the odd angry tweet from Roscommon fans about how we discussed that incident. So moving on swiftly. Colm Keys, I'm one of the people who's kind of drank the Kool-Aid on this Derry team. I really like them. I just because of the sheer talent that they have kind of scattered throughout the team. The kind of fact that kind of they have scores from their full back line to their full forward line. I want to believe that they can beat Tyrone. Can you make any case for it?
I think they'll make life very difficult for them. That's for sure. They'll set up in a way that Tyrone will have to be very, very patient. I think that's their best chance of staying in this game and maybe catching Tyrone late. But I don't see them having enough quality up front. They have a lot of strong runners, Garrett McKinless and obviously Chrissy McCaig and Brendan Rodgers from the back. But I just don't see them having that quality. Shane McGuigan's a very, very, very good forward. And obviously Niall Loughlin was good throughout the league as well. But I don't see them matching up to what Tyrone bring from an attacking sense. I think Darragh Canavan, while he didn't show everything against Fermanagh, I think he'll make big progress this year for Tyrone. Obviously, Colin McShane, there's time on his side, and Conor McKenna got off on had his red card overturned earlier in the week, and I'd expect him to actually start because of the impact he made and the energy he brings to Tyrone at all times. And you know, he's a player that big plays all the time. You could see that against Fermanagh the last day. So you know, they could have Peter Hart back as well. He must be pretty close to being back as well. And while, like Dublin, you think, well, with the loss of those players, maybe their bench is weakened a bit. It probably is to a degree, but I still think 1 to 17 or 18, they are right up there with, obviously, they're All-Ireland champions. Of course, they're right up there. But I don't see any major dip in form. And I'd expect that likes of McKenna, McCurry, Darragh Canavan will weave their way. They'll pick their moments against this Derry defence, and they'll eventually break them down, and they'll win.
You could have knocked me down with a feather, Rory, when Conor McKenna got off with his suspension. It is interesting that he didn't start like it was for Fermanagh. They probably weren't showing their full hand, but it does speak to the strength of this Tyrone squad that Conor McKenna, who's like clearly a superb, absolutely wonderfully talented footballer, great physical athlete, like doesn't necessarily have to start. Same way they had McShane last year, you know, didn't feel a need to start him. That kind of strength and depth, which is obviously being hit by the departures, you know, they still have enough that Conor McKenna wasn't an automatic starter in the first round of the Ulster Championship.
Yeah, I think the build up to a certain extent had a lot of the preview chat has been loosely based around maybe one player that shouldn't be playing in Conor McKenna, and then another player who maybe should be playing and is not in Kieran McFall. And I think he's a massive loss for Derry. I mean, look, I thought he was one of their best players right throughout the league campaign, and for him to decide to go to America, I'd say, like, I can imagine, I would love to have been a fly on the wall when he had that conversation with Rory Gallagher, but I'd go along with the two lads. They just don't.
That might be another leave the WhatsApp group situation. It's on your way to the airport.
You know? But like, I go along to two lads. Absolutely. I mean, I was just looking back at their last 5 championship meetings. You mentioned that they hasn't really been a rivalry in 20 years. And I think that's so far back. You have to go back to 2006 for Derry's last win, the championship against Tyrone. They've only scored 1 goal in the last 5 championship meetings. Now, the funny thing is, Tyrone will give you chances. Like, they will give you the odd chance. And I look, for man, I got 2 the last day. If they can get a couple of goals, I'd give Derry a shake. But no more than that, really. I just think Tyrone are operating at a higher level. They've timed their run differently. I think Colm was right. They kind of arse boxed around the league. You know, they just made sure they stayed up in the end. And like, all their focus is to go back to back, which I think they'll also struggle to do, but they'll have enough for Derry on Sunday.
Okay. I'm gonna stick with Derry. Breezing through, Monaghan v Down.
You love an underdog, Mikey.
Yeah.
I do.
An underdog.
Yeah, but you see, that was under my breath that time. I don't really believe in this underdog anymore. This underdog I predicted will win the Ulster Championship. I'm all of a sudden lost a lot of faith in them. Monaghan v Down. This is another kind of one word, lads, because Down's build up to this has obviously not been great. James McCartan, very unhappy with kind of attitude at a mini training camp. I don't know if it was on Bettystown Beach, and I don't know whether the wind was a factor of Colm ORourke, but he was cajoled back. But Down don't seem to be a happy, motivated team, which is exactly what they're coming up against in Monaghan. Can anybody make any case for a Down win here?
Not really. I think they were really poor in the league, and I think James McCartan has given the impression of a man who's after wandering into a job and beginning to think, why did I do this? Yeah. Things have changed significantly.
This parachute's a rucksack. Yeah.
So it seems to have been a lot different when he was there before in terms of commitment and getting the best out of them. So, like, again, Monaghan ultra competitive in the first division. Again, hard to see by Monaghan in this one.
Yeah, Colm Keys, any prayer for Down?
No, even though they won their last championship meeting, I think that was five years ago. But that's, again, Colin mentions, different from James McCartan's time. It's different here again. They really are depleting with every passing year, and they're particularly poor during the league. And they didn't get all the Kilcoo players back that they probably would have wanted. And Monaghan, we mentioned Kildare operating at a higher level in our conversation around Leinster. Well, that's the case with Monaghan too. And for them to do what they did to Dublin on the last day of the league, and the manner of their victory too, I think they're one of the most organised teams around. Maybe some of their players maybe on the wrong side of 30 and all that, but they're still giving a lot. And the 2 half-backs there, Conor McCarthy has moved back, and Ryan McInnesby, and that's the real energy around the team. And of course, Jack McCarran has been resurgent, and he's really enjoying an Indian summer to his career. Even though he's only in his late 20s, he's been very, very strong. So all around, I think Monaghan will have far too much for Down.
Yeah, and the winners, obviously, Rory played the winners of Derry and Tyrone. So Monaghan they'll want to not put on a show, but they'll want to make sure everything's in working order here. They're just the great survivors in the league, and they seem, as Colm says, they just kind of keep coming. They regenerate every year. So if they put on a good show against them, you couldn't, Tyrone would be very, very wary. Like, they'll probably see themselves as being on the tougher side of the draw here.
The one thing you'd say about Monaghan is they have struggled in the past when they have been labelled with the favourites tag, when they've gone in where there's a little bit of expectation. You know, they've been caught a few times. That's not going to happen, obviously, this weekend. And I just think the whole thing around down football for me is kind of sad, actually, in one sense. I mean, like, whether Tyrone like to admit it or not, in my head anyway, Down are the true aristocrats of Ulster football. You know, going back, and I know Colm obviously has a sore point on this, going back to 91 too, but like, you know, when you think of the players that they've produced down through history, and the McCartans themselves, you know, like the family, it's just incredible footballers that they have produced all down through history. Mickey Linden, Greg Blaney, all these guys, incredible. Like, and the style of football, Sean O'Neill going back to the 60s, like the style of football that Down have played. And then I look at what's going on in their club scene, and you obviously have the current All-Ireland club champions. They won an Ulster under-20 title last year. So I just don't know, like, you're kind of saying to yourself, what the hell is going on? You know, and it's just sad that they're going in with such low expectations for a county that I would generally feel should be right up there in the mix with all the top thoroughbreds. But yeah, I don't really see anything other than a Monaghan win this weekend. I just think they're too low an ebb, and yeah, it'll be an interesting semi-final then between themselves and Tyrone, if that's how it plays out.
I don't think, Rory, though, that Kilcoo being All-Ireland club champions, I don't think there's sort of a significant advantage for Down county team in that. And it's been the same in a lot of counties where they have club champions. It often has been more of a distraction than anything else. And the style of play of Kilcoo, and they're a team where they are a team rather than special individuals. And I don't know whether, maybe apart from a couple, there's anybody there who would make a significant difference to the Down team, even though I suppose if 3 or 4 of them went in on the panel. But they seem to be wrapped up in their club scene more so than giving commitment to the county.
Yeah, and it's a shame because obviously one of our own, Aidan O'Rourke, is in there as coach as well. Who's obviously an excellent coach, and it just doesn't seem to be happening for them.
But you have the same with Crossmaglen. Like, there wasn't a significant material advantage to Armagh.
Cara Finn really, I mean, haven't in a similar sense, you know.
Ballygunner in Waterford hurling aren't a mass producer of players for the county team either.
Yeah, but in football, you know, you mentioned Cara Finn, Crossmaglen, and Kilcoo. Sometimes there is a bit of conflict between the strong club team in a county like that and the county team, and that probably has happened in those counties in the past too.
Yeah.
Looking west, we got one game there, Sligo v Roscommon. Sligo have home advantage, but I don't think, judging, unless New York have become a powerhouse of Gaelic football, it's hard to see how home advantage is going to do a lot here. Anybody, Colm O'Rourke, can you make a case for Sligo here? This is a Roscommon win, isn't it?
Not really. I watched the Sligo New York game live up in RTÉ on the Sunday game that night, and it was a very enjoyable game, I must say. But the second half was basically a lot of pass the ball away to the opposition. And it was very exciting, and it was at a level. And that level would be substantially below Roscommon. I suppose you have to take into account Roscommon won the second division. They scored 120 against Galway. Galway, who have now come along and beaten Mayo in the championship. So it's a very competitive Connacht championship between Galway, Mayo and Roscommon, and the rest are a little bit behind, or maybe a good bit behind.
Yeah, I'm going to take it everybody else agrees we have a Roscommon win here, yes?
Yeah, I think though Colm does make a good point in relation to Sligo, and I don't know whether it was maybe forgotten to a certain extent in the aftermath of that win over in New York. Like, the Sligo players went into that game with a very, very difficult mindset. There was a lot going on, as we know. You know, those players had to travel to New York with, you know, a terrible tragedy going on in the background, and for them to go out and play the way that they did, I'm not so sure if they were actually given enough credit for that in a lot of ways, because playing football was probably the last thing that they wanted to do at that point.
Yeah,
when they've gone on to win the under-20s beat,
which is a huge thing as well for Sligo football. Fantastic,
it really has them. But I think Roscommon's forward line is one of the best in the game. I think the players that they've put together between the two Smiths, Kieran Murtagh, Conor Cox, and you know, they're really, really strong. They've Keane McKeown there as well. They're very
good midfield as well, Colm.
Very good midfield. Ulton Harney and Eddie Nolan have played all the games in the league. They've forged a great partnership, and they're hard to break down too with the two dailies there.
The dailies, yeah.
They have a. They have a very, very strong. I think their forwards are really good, and I think they'll really put it up to. I think it'll be Galway obviously coming through against Leitrim in a Connacht final. I think Roscommon will be here, and I certainly, just because Galway beat Mayo, there's no certainty that they'll push on.
Absolutely not. That's not how the Connacht Championship works, and it's one of the great things about it. Finally, then to Munster.
The big one.
Rory, we'll go to your home province. We'll go to you first. Yeah. Look, we've talked about Cork and Kerry. They're one-sided a draw. So there is a very big carrot here for the four teams playing here. Clare v Limerick, Waterford v Tipperary. Win 2 games and you stay in the Sam Maguire for the teams from Division 4 and Division 3. We're not here denigrating the Tailteann Cup. We keep mentioning it. It could be an absolutely wonderful thing. There's plenty of counties now. Lee should be a great example of a team who could really use a great run in the Tailteann Cup. But like the chance of making a Munster final here, you're probably going into the big green and gold thresher, but at the same time, like, it's a Munster final. And you'd say that Rory, Clare and Limerick game in particular is very intriguing. Clare are a known quantity and Limerick are very much a coming force.
Yeah, I think Limerick have put a huge amount of work in, and I think they have. I mean, look, they're going to avoid the Tailteann Cup anyway because they got promoted out of Division 3. But I think the one team to watch on that side of the draw from me will be Tipperary. I think they have rallied somewhat. They had obviously a desperate start to the league campaign. They had a huge turnover of players. Obviously, Michael Quinlivan is in America at the minute, and they're kind of left with Conor Sweeney to start to lead the line on alone up front. It's a tricky enough game for them going down to Waterford, but they will win that, which will put them into a semi-final against either Clare or Limerick. And that's a much more difficult game to call. Now, look, Clare obviously have a bit more form, but I would see that really very much as a 50-50 Clare-Limerick. Very fit, like, now everyone will go for Clare on the basis of Colm Collins and that track record, but trust me, given the rivalry down there in a football and a hurling and a GAA and a sport context, that will be tight.
I wouldn't necessarily go for Clare. Obviously, I'll go for the team with the longer odds. Colm O'Rourke.
You're the dog king.
Limerick, Limerick did impress during the league, and perhaps surprisingly, maybe they weren't one of the teams being talked about in Division 3. But as Roy says, Colm Collins he's so well established. He's a man who's able to, almost we were talking about the Brian Cody style of quietly regenerate a team, 1 or 2 players a year, not working off the biggest player base. It's very impressive what he's doing. So certainly won't want to lose to their nearest and dearest neighbours who have the whip hand on them in hurling at the moment in a big way as well.
Yeah, I'd say if you were having a manager of the last 10 years, Colm Collins would probably have to come into consideration for what he has done with Clare. And again, stable enough type of league show, 6 points, ended up they weren't really in much danger of relegation from early on. And Limerick then promoted, so they're both playing in the second division next year. And there's going to be a big hurling clash there in Ennis for Clare and Limerick coming up in a couple of weeks as well. So there's a lot of local rivalry at stake. Again, Limerick in the league final against Louth, they seem to be in a very strong position with about 10 minutes gone the second half, and then they lost possession close to the Louth goal, banged down the field, and the ball was in the net, and it changed the whole course of the game. So Limerick are improving, and I think that because of the improvement that Limerick have shown during the league, that they're in a much stronger position going into this match. So I'll be going with you, Rory, as one. I'm not just going to go with the favourites for the weekend. I'll go with Limerick.
Oh, look, you're all joining me now on the long odds bandwagon. What about you, Colin Keys? Would you agree?
I think Clare. I think Clare would be strong enough here. Now, as long as they had the last couple of league games, certainly the last game they were missing Killian Brennan and Manus Doherty. Killian Brennan would be one of their better defenders. He's been very good. He's Gary Brennan's brother. He'd be very good for them. And Manus Doherty, one of those players you mentioned that Colm Collins brings in, and he was very effective in the early stages of the league for them too. But they have some very good forwards. Obviously, David Tubridy stands out, but Owen Cleary, Cian O'Dea, and they've moved Jamie Malone back to half back, and he's a really pacey player. He carries the ball very well, and when he was playing up front, he was good for 2 or 3 points a game, and I presume he'll still make that kind of contribute those type of runs from a deeper position. All around, I think Clare have a lot of experience of playing at a higher level in the league, and I just think that will count. I mean, they're forewarned and forearmed here, because that was a very decent Division 3 campaign by Limerick, and right up to the goal in the Division 3 league final, they were in that. But I think Clare will be very wary, and they will plan accordingly and win.
Okay, and I think we're finally all giving a nod to Tip against Waterford. That would be a major shock. So unless speak now or forever hold your peace, we'll go with a Tip win. Thanks for that, gents. I think we've covered everything. I said we'd only give a nod to a few games, but I think we could publish a treatise on down football, and we were only going to mention it. So I think we've done our job here this morning. Thank you, well done everybody. Just to mention, obviously we've got 2 games on RTÉ: Derry v Tyrone in the Ulster Football Championship, and Galway v Kilkenny in the Leinster Hurling Championship. And Mikey, if you want to watch Cork v Clare,
yeah, you can get it on GAA Go. But Mikey, and one final point, right? There are 13 Sam Maguire, Liam McCarthy Cup matches. Now that doesn't include Nicky Rackert, Joe McDonough, and all of those other games as well. There's 13 games on this weekend. So you look at that from a scheduling point of view, and you look at that from a program maker's point of view. So when everyone starts whinging and moaning, you get
your defense in before the attack.
Like Willie John McBride said, I'm getting my retaliation in first. And everybody starts whinging and moaning on Sunday night. Why we only got 90 seconds, or we only got a minute, or we only got this. Well, look, and you put 13 matches on at the same weekend, and you have to squash all that into 110 minutes. Then you do the maths.
And there's 4 matches next weekend, and not one of them is likely to be competitive.
There you go.
I was actually surprised some of those games, some of those Munster and Leinster games weren't actually on the first weekend, or that the scheduling wasn't different. I think,
or they could put them on next weekend, Colm, when there's very little on.
Yeah, well, look, obviously things, but there was room to maybe stretch out this part of it. There's been why those games last weekend in Leinster weren't on the first weekend, and also why weren't the Munster games maybe last weekend, given that they're backing up to semi-finals.
Could you have played Clare? Could you have played Clare versus Limerick on Friday night, tomorrow night? Look, anyway.
Well, Friday night has long been an issue, Rory.
Yeah, it is. But let's address it.
The GPA aren't happy with Friday night games.
You have to get that kicked.
We nearly got through.
Can we bring them in here?
My God, Colm O'Rourke, that's impressive.
Can we blame the whole scheduling on the GPA?
Right at the buzzer, he gets the GPA in there. That's impressive, Colm. That's the kind of finishing you were renowned for in your playing day. We won't get the GPA there. We've done more than enough. You can listen to all commentary on RTÉ's Radio 1 Saturday and Sunday Sport, and we'll have live blogs and reports, reaction, everything on the RTÉ Sport website and the RTÉ News app. We certainly should go now, because we started before breakfast and I think it's lunchtime. So thank you to Colm, thank you to Colm, thank you to Derek, and thank you to Rory, and we'll be back with you on Monday to have a look back on this massive amount of games. So see you later. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.